Back for the Rochester Championship, round number 3 recap. These games are 60 minutes with a 30-second increment. We have a 6-player round robin, and I had 1.5 points going into round 3, tied for first. And the other 2 players tied for first, Master T and Michael, they're playing each other in this round. And I am playing with the white pieces against David. So let's jump into the game. I started with D4, C4, and now we see E6. And here I played G3. This is going for a Catalan type setup with bishop to G2. This is something that I recommend in the Catalan course, and I've been playing it quite a bit with the white pieces. And now bishop to B4 check by black. This signifies a Bogo-Indian. So instead of a Catalan, now this is called a Bogo-Indian. And there are 2 main responses, bishop to D2 and knight to D2. I was kind of thinking that David might have done a little bit of preparation for me. I had recently played in the Rochester Open tournament, and I had played knight b to d2. And this is what's in our Catalan course. And I think I like those lines better. I like playing the lines from the course. But in this game, I was just a little bit worried that he might have something specifically prepared. So I played bishop to d2. Also a good line. He played queen to e7, defending the bishop. Bishop g2, takes, d6. So one of the key ideas in the Bogo-Indian, oftentimes black trades off the dark squared bishop, leaving him with only the light square bishop. And then the plan is to put all of the pawns on dark squares. So we're going to see this pawn come up to e5. Sometimes even you'll see b6 and a5. But every pawn on a dark square complementing this bishop on the light squares. So that's the plan for black. It does give white a slight advantage because you can see white's got extra space, pretty easy development. But black has this very solid, consistent plan, and I know it's coming. So knight c3, castle, knight f3, pawn to e5. So there's the pawn on the dark square strategy. Castle, c6. Now I play e4. So the idea here is I want to use this extra space and try to apply pressure to black's position. If black ever plays e takes d4, I take back with the knight, and now this d6 pawn is a weakness. I have a half open file, applying some pressure to that pawn. So I'm okay leaving this tension for now. I don't need to take on e5 anytime soon. Bishop g4 played, and I played knight h4. So the reason I did this is black's position is a little bit cramped. For example, black would love to play knight b to d7 here, but this bishop is low on squares. So maybe here I play h3. And if the bishop drops back, knight to f5, hitting the queen, hitting d6. There was no option to retreat that bishop back because this knight's in the way. And bishop to e6 actually gets the bishop trapped. There's nowhere for that bishop to go. So that's why I put the knight out on h4, thinking I don't want to trade any of the minor pieces. Let's put a little more pressure on black. Try to figure out how to get that knight developed. So David goes knight out to a6. That makes sense. h3. And here I wanted to put the question to the bishop. If it goes to h5, I'm jumping into f5 with my knight. And now I'm just building in the center. So trying to play simple chess, keep things developed. Rook d8, a3, knight h5. And at this point, I missed black's threat, and it's a thematic idea. I really should have saw it. He wants to play knight to f4. I completely missed it, and I just go b4. And when he played it in the game, all of a sudden I started burning my time thinking, oh, great. Am I in a worse position now? Am I close to losing? And this is move 15. I'm looking at my score sheet. I had 32 minutes remaining after b4. He played knight to f4 with 24 minutes remaining, and then I took 5 minutes to play knight to f5. So I think from a time management perspective, I was probably burning more time than I should have in the beginning of the game. With this time control, 60 plus 30, it's important to leave some time for later on because that 30-second increment is not always enough to finish off a game with high accuracy. Okay, so if I were to take here, queen takes h4, I wasn't in love with this position, but after f5, it's actually okay for white. It's not a bad position. There's no additional piece besides the queen helping with the attack. In my analysis, I thought g6 could be a good move because if I take, Bishop takes h3. But what I didn't realize is I don't have to take. I could play queen to e3. And if he takes here, now take back. And after bishop takes, d takes e5. Queen guards this h3 pawn. That's an important pawn, helping defend my king. This pawn takes back. Now I can play queen takes e5. There's no bishop takes h3 because of a tactic. Rook takes, bishop takes, queen check, winning the rook. So I'm not going to calculate all of that. But in the game, that's why I was afraid of pawn takes knight. I thought his queen coming out, pressure on h3. I didn't think I could get away with playing f5. So instead, I played knight to f5. And during the game, I thought I was worse here. And I think David thought the same, which kind of created this interesting dynamic. He takes, I take knight, his bishop retreats. And again, I was afraid to play f5. This is one of the main takeaways from the game. I need to do a little calculation here and figure out that, hey, f5 is okay to play. This is not weakening the kingside structure at all. In fact, it's making my king safer. Because one of the most dangerous things in this position for white is if this rook gets into the game. So picture this f-pawn being gone and this f-pawn being gone, with this rook having access down the f-file. My f2 pawn is actually blocking my rook, and it's difficult for me to defend the kingside position. So f5, key move, and I missed it. d5 played. Bishop out to h5, hitting my rook. Now he plays f6. Again, f5 is a strong move here. f5 is the best move on the board. It looks odd putting all of these pawns on the same color as the bishop, but this allows this rook to come up to e3, swing over to g3, move the king over. And actually, I have some pressure coming down the g file, and the extra space makes it really hard for black to take advantage of this bishop imbalance. That bishop is not going to be a good piece for black. So f5 missed. I play queen e3. c5. So at this point, we're at move 21. I had 12 minutes and David had 13. So we're getting under time pressure already. And really, I think both of us should have played faster up until this point. There's no reason to be under time pressure here. I play b5, kicking the knight. He goes back to b8. And this is an important decision. If he goes to c7, to me, the knight appears trapped. But maybe he could go to a8 and b6. I think he played the move that makes more sense to me. Knight b8, d7, b6. And that's how he's going to apply pressure to this pawn on c4. I play this move very quickly, bishop to f3, thinking, okay, let's trade these bishops off, get my queen over, move the king, rook g1, start to attack the black king. As soon as I played bishop to f3, I start looking at it and instantly regretting this move. Bishop f3 is not a good move. And David said after the game, he said, why didn't you play f5 there? And he was 100% right. g6 is not something that I have to be afraid of. I can now play bishop to f3. He can't take here because he loses the bishop. If he takes me, I takes here, I get exactly what I wanted. But in the game, when I play bishop to f3 immediately, he takes, and here he plays f5. And we both thought black was better here after f5. With deeper calculation, it turns out white is better after f5. And the move he should have played is e takes f4. And then try to bring this knight onto the e5 square, where it forever pressures c4. This would give black the advantage. We both missed that, and we both thought f5 was good for black. F takes e, queen takes, e takes. And here, I'm just thinking if I can get a drawish position, I will be happy with that. I was happy with a draw at this point. Things were not looking good. So I take queen, he takes, and here I'm thinking, oh great, active rook. I mean, look at this guy in the third rank. He's a monster. This knight is ready to come here and then either go to e5 or b6, hitting this pawn on c4, which is really hard to defend. I felt like I was in some big trouble here. So then I start thinking hard. How can I save this position? And I play rook to e3. Essentially, rook to e3 is the only move here, protecting this third rank because both my rook and knight were attacked. And after takes, I had this idea. I can play rook f4 and knight e4. I can start to create counterplay. And David goes for rook e8. I still thought that black was better here. But this idea is strong. rook f4, rook takes e3, and knight to e4. Black can grab another pawn, going up 2 pawns. But the problem is I'm about to take on d6. So let's say rook takes a3. Knight takes d6. Now this is a protected passer, and b7's hanging, and my rook is in good place. This is not good for black, and this pawn is well defended. So instead, after knight to e4, he plays pawn to g5. So the idea is if knight takes g5, this draws my knight away from this important square and walks into this fork. So probably most important, walks into the fork. Instead, I moved my rook over, rook to g4, pinning the g-pawn to the king, h6. Now knight takes d6. So we're back to equal on material. Knight d7, king f2, and he retreats the rook. This was a mistake. The best move is to grab one of the pawns, but it's not easy to see. It makes sense to bring the rook back when you were just thinking, I don't want white to get too active. Taking one of the pawns would have been best. So now I take b7. I'm up 1 pawn, and this pawn is ready to go, and this pawn is under pressure. So during the game, I did feel the tides were turning here. I felt I had the advantage. But David did a nice job creating some counterplay. So he plays knight to e5. Now I'm thinking, okay, well, where do I want to put the rook? And this is move 34. I had 3 minutes left. David had 1. So we're just getting 30 seconds a move. There's no additional minutes being added to the clock. This is a time scramble. And David is good at time scrambles. He told me he plays quite a bit of action chess, which is, I believe, 30 minutes with 5-second delay only. So he's used to playing quick over the board. I find this idea, and I calculate one line. Knight takes c5, knight takes rook, pawn takes. If he goes after my knight, I can play d6. And if he takes the knight, d7, and he can't stop the pawn from queening. I calculate that one line, and I go for it. Knight takes c5. So I'm sacking the exchange. After takes, he did play rook c7, d6, and he cannot safely take the knight because I play d7 and the pawn queens. Really cool that this tactic worked, and if you count the pawns up, I have 2 extra pawns for the knight, but it almost feels like 3 extra pawns for the exchange. 3 extra pawns for the exchange because this h-pawn isn't doing much. He plays rook f7, king e3, king f8, knight e6 check. So the idea here is I want to get the knight out of the way to move the c-pawn up. King e4. And this move surprised me. It shouldn't have, but there wasn't a lot of time on the clock. Pawn to h5. Now I got to figure out, well, how do I stop this h-pawn running up the board? And I make a blunder here. Pawn to c5. This is close to draw territory all of a sudden if black finds h takes g4. So what I should play here is knight takes g5. And I think I was afraid of this, but the knight can come back to e6. And if rook takes g4 check, king d5, this pawn is too slow. c5, h3, c6, h2. My king guards this square, so his rook can't come here. My knight guards this, so there's no check. And this doesn't save the pawn. Oh, excuse me. So I can go d7 check, and the knight guards the queening square. So I'm queening first. Crazy line, really hard to see. I play c5, and h4 was played. But the reason this isn't as good is because I get to keep this pawn. Knight takes g5. So David should have captured on g4, but this is the natural move because it's further away from the king. He goes rook g7, king f5, takes the knight. And this was something that I'd calculated out. I knew I had to calculate this one line before playing king f5. And if you want to pause the video and try to figure it out, rook takes knight, see what you can figure out. Take, push. I think both of us had in our minds originally that the c-pawn goes next in terms of pushing these pawns up the board. But I'd calculated that the b-pawn is faster. Pawn to b6, and after takes, there's no way for this king to stop the pawn. He moves here, b7, and the pawns are working together. They're cutting off these 2 squares. And after here, queen, queen. I have 3 extra pawns, and it's my move, so I can start checking black. And I think I can win the queen by force. check, check. Get him on the diagonal. So crazy game. This put me in sole first place because Master T and Michael drew their game. So after day 1, I had 2 out of 3. 2.5 out of 3. Sole first place. I think the main takeaways for this game were time management. At this point, needing to calculate a little bit better. That's been my problem in a lot of games. Calculation. Figuring out, hey, it's okay to play G takes F5 here. And then the thematic idea of playing F5, which was missed a couple times. And being okay with this bishop being trapped in, realizing that that's going to shut down any counterplay coming from that rook on F8. Hope you guys enjoyed this Game 3 recap. I will put a link up above, one of the other games. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the Game 4 recap.